I review a lot of knives on this channel, arguably too many according to my wife, and lately it feels like the $50 to $100 category has gotten ridiculously good. You can get really great steels, really smooth action, solid construction, and generally pretty interesting designs without spending too much money at all. The budget category is absolutely crazy right now, and I'm absolutely here for it. But that creates a pretty interesting problem for knives like these, because sitting in front of me are two really premium folders from Kansept, the Strip and the Contra. And the thing is, neither one is cheap. Pretty far from it. We're talking roughly $200 or more for a single knife, which kind of puts these in completely different categories than the budget knives that you and I might be familiar with. But we're also taking two pretty different approaches to what a premium EDC knife should be. The Strip is flashy, kind of exotic looking combination of everyone's favorite MagnaCut, carbon fiber, and titanium, while the Contra on the other hand is a little bit more utilitarian with an S90V blade and a full titanium construction. So rather than doing two separate reviews, I thought this would be a lot more interesting in grouping them together. What happens when Kansept goes premium? Are these generally really high-end knives that compete in this price range, or are you mainly just paying for expensive materials? Let's check it out. Let's start with arguably my favorite of the two, and that would be the Strip. This is designed by Ron Steele Jr., and visually, I think this is easily the more interesting knife of the two. There's arguably quite a lot going on here, but somehow it all kind of comes together and works. You have this kind of mean and aggressive Wharncliffe style blade, a really big blade hole, a very small front flipper, and then you have this pretty angular handle design and a really nice, interesting combination of shredded carbon fiber inlays and a black washed titanium frame. And despite this all being a pretty crazy design and look, underneath it, we have that MagnaCut blade, and it's actually a really nice EDC knife. The Strip comes in at 8.21 inches overall with a 3.4 inch blade. And of course, the really big headline here is obviously the blade steel, MagnaCut. And honestly, I feel like at this point, this steel really needs little introduction. But the crazy thing here is, this has a mirror DLC finish, and it almost kind of has a shine to it, which looks much different than any other black blade I've ever had. It's kind of hard to tell in the video, but in person, this finish looks really, really nice. And I kind of feel like the whole knife kind of has a super clean look. It has a pretty fancy blade finish, these absolutely incredible shredded carbon fiber inlays, then we have the black titanium, just a really mean but kind of elegant looking knife in my opinion. The blade itself, it's a Wharncliffe with a nice flat grind that's also incredibly thin behind the edge, and I actually really like this blade shape for an EDC knife. You've got a pretty controllable tip for opening packages and doing more detailed work, plenty of a straight cutting edge here. You're not really dealing with a massive amount of belly. For the stuff I actually use my pocket knives for, this is an extremely practical blade shape and I really like it. And kind of despite how angular everything looks here in the handle, it's actually pretty comfortable in hand. There's a pronounced finger groove up here. The front pretty locks you into place. Tons of room on the handle, get a full grip. I will say outside of small jimping on the front flipper, there really isn't any jimping here on the spine, so the grip isn't the most secure thing. That's a very small minor issue. Now I want to talk about the action. You have two deployment methods, and first up, the most obvious is the giant blade hole. Works really well with the reverse flick. It flies open and shut pretty smoothly with a little shake. It's not the most smooth, fidgety action I've ever had, but it does the job. Not one I would really gravitate towards if I wanted something crazy fidgety at my desk, but it does the job. But what doesn't do the job is the front flipper. I've been on record saying I'm absolutely horrible at front flippers. I just have really small hands. It's kind of hard to get the right leverage to get most of these to work. That said, I'm still able to do most of it, but on this one, it's kind of impossible for me. On front flippers, I kind of pinch the knife here at the top and I hit it with my index finger, but on here, due to this being a frame lock, where I naturally want to put my fingers, it's pushing in on the frame lock, which prevents this from deploying. So no matter how much I try or kind of change up my grip, I really can't get this front flipper to work. It's kind of totally user error 100%, but just something I wanted to note. So what are some things I like and maybe some that I really don't? Starting with the positives, it just has to be the overall look. I mean, for one, just look at these shredded carbon fiber inlays. They almost kind of sparkle, and this is honestly probably the best carbon fiber I've ever seen. I'm also not really typically a big fan of black blades, but this one looks pretty sweet with this black hardware. Paired this with a MagnaCut blade steel, it just kind of rocks here. MagnaCut is still something of a rarity for me. I think this is only my fourth knife ever with it, so it's always a welcome addition. But there are a couple things I would keep in mind. First, the action and the front flipper. Because for one, the action just doesn't feel as satisfying as I feel like it probably could be. Maybe this just needs to be broken in a little bit more, but it feels just a little bit slow to me. And pair this with the front flipper that's kind of unusable for me, I feel like the action department here is just a little bit lacking. And then we have the elephant in the room, and that's the price. $231. That's a lot of money. So once you cross over that $200 mark, simply just having titanium and MagnaCut, that doesn't really cut it anymore. There's just way too many excellent knives kind of competing for your money. So while I feel like the Strip feels premium, you really need to love this specific design itself for that price to kind of make sense. And that's kind of where our second knife gets interesting, because the Contra looks almost completely the opposite design-wise. So let's check this out. Where the Strip kind of screams for attention, I feel like the Contra is a little bit more understated. And don't get me wrong, it's still kind of a funky design, but it just seems so much more utilitarian in a sense and more like a chunk. This is the Contra, designed by Nathan Contra, is much more my idea of more of a straightforward utilitarian premium folder. It's clean, it's kind of simple, it's all titanium, and it's a little ugly, almost in a Cybertruck sense away. But once you start looking a little bit closer at the details, there's actually some rather nice stuff here. Now the Contra is a little bit shorter than the Strip we just looked at earlier, and this measures 7.83 inches overall with a 3.25 inch blade. And no MagnaCut here, but instead we have another premium blade steel, S90V. And S90V is known especially for really great edge retention, really good wear resistance, and this makes a lot of sense on this knife because I feel like this one's kind of designed around everyday cutting. And this is helping with the grind because underneath a pretty rather broad sheep split blade, this is coming with a hollow grind. This is kind of the exact combination I want to see. You've got a really premium edge retaining steel, a really thin blade stock, and a hollow grind. So this guy is definitely a slicer. And then we have this full titanium handle. There's no crazy carbon fiber inlays this time around or complicated milling, just a very simple flat piece of titanium. But I actually think that simplicity is kind of one of the Contra's strengths. There's a nice symmetry in the handle. You've got enough space here to get a really full, comfortable grip. There's even this little nice spot here in the blade that your thumb kind of falls into and locks into. It's a pretty nice sized knife, but I like the proportions here. The 3.25 inch blade is kind of right in that sweet spot for me where you've got enough cutting edge for basically anything, but still the knife doesn't really start to feel unnecessarily large. And then there's the action, and this is where the Contra gets a little bit more interesting. You have typical thumb studs here, and the action is pretty nice. The blade flies out with the thumb studs, and also a little shake gets it shut. But funny enough, this also has the smallest front flipper I've ever seen, and much like the Strip from earlier, I have the exact same issue with failing to get it to work, just due to the finger placement on the lock bar. And again, totally user error, but just slightly annoying. Now for some pros and cons. The biggest advantage for me with the Contra is just the construction. With the full titanium construction, the titanium handle, titanium clip, it just feels like a brute. And you pair that with this big, mean looking blade, it just kind of comes together to form a really solid unit of a knife. And it just feels really solid in hand and kind of ready for anything. And another thing I like is this blade shape. You don't see that many sheepfoot blades like this with this swedge here at the top. And it looks kind of different, and I really like it. I also really like the materials here. You can never go wrong with titanium, of course, and S90V is a nice touch as well. But the downsides are, this doesn't come cheap. This has a retail price just under the $200 mark. And much like the Strip from earlier, that puts it in an extremely competitive part of the knife market. You're no longer comparing this against $70 overseas folders. You're comparing this against knives people have probably been saving up for a while. So put this in front of somebody who isn't into knives at all and tell them that it costs over or close to $200. They kind of might wonder where the money went. Because there's no really cool, crazy carbon fiber inlays, no micarta, there's no crazy machining or milling here, no really exotic looking finish. It's just a really nicely made titanium frame lock with a really excellent blade steel. But for an enthusiast kind of like me, I feel like that simplicity might kind of be the point. So after carrying both of these for a while, how do they compare? I think the easiest way to explain them is the Strip is the enthusiast knife you buy with your heart. The Contra is the enthusiast knife you buy with your head. I feel like the Strip is more exciting. You've got the MagnaCut, the mirror DLC finish, the really nice shredded carbon fiber inlays, titanium, and just one of the really cool distinct designs I've handled recently. So if somebody asks me which knife feels more special when I pull it out of the box, it's the Strip, hands down. But if you ask me which design makes the more sense purely as an everyday cutting tool and which I'd personally carry in my pocket more, I think I'd lean with the Contra. This one has slightly smaller dimensions, full titanium construction, a really slicey blade, just a really solid feeling in hand. But regardless, these two are not competing with each other. They're two answers to the exact same question. What should a premium EDC knife actually be? These two knives have really changed my perception of Kansept a little bit. Because when you're approaching or crossing that $200 mark, I become so much more critical, and rightfully so. Because at $60, I can forgive a really boring pocket clip or slightly awkward ergonomics. But at $200 plus, I want the knife to almost feel perfect. And I think both of these do. The Strip is easily my favorite from a pure design standpoint. It's probably the most visually interesting, and it backs it up with a super steel of MagnaCut. The Contra is kind of the opposite. It's a lot more simple, yet still incredibly practical and built around a really excellent S90V blade. So would I call either of these a value knife? Absolutely not. There are knives costing half as much that will open the exact same Amazon box. But that's not exactly why you buy something like this. At this level, you're paying for materials, machining, action, design, and probably most importantly, something that you actually enjoy carrying. So between these two, I think Kansept has done a really good job at showing that they can play in this premium space. But I'm curious what direction you guys would go in. Would you take the crazier MagnaCut Strip down here below, or would you save a little bit of money and go with the more utilitarian Contra? Let me know down below in the comments. I'd love to hear what you think. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.